Secretary Cardona, thank you so much for being here with us today. Especially, I know it's very interesting times all around, but really appreciate your leadership. It's been a privilege to partner with you and your staff on Unlocking Career Success, which is about blurring the lines between high school, college, and careers. And first question I wanted to ask you is, what's your view on what it's really going to take to do an all-out effort to redesign our education system so that all learners are connected to good jobs and careers?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here, and it is great to collaborate, especially because I took half your staff when I became secretary. Love the work JFS is doing, love the innovation, and the reality is, look, the word reform gets thrown around a lot. I don't use the word reform because reforms come and go. I talk about an evolution in education that's needed. And I come to this with the experience of not only a lifelong educator, but as a father whose children just recently graduated high school. And I feel like, it hasn't evolved enough. So my mentality is the same mentality that I have with a lot of the things that we have to do in education. We really have to create a shared vision for what's possible. And I think, there's so much potential in this country for us to really accelerate the evolution of our high schools, our 2-year programs, our 4-year programs, our community-based organizations, our industry partners. And to me, the real focus should be, collectively, in creating the connective tissue between groups and organizations that have historically been in silos. There's a silo between K-12 and higher ed. And we have to break that down. And in my opinion, that's the work of leadership if we're going to maximize the potential of our country and of our students. And so to me, that's a focus area of removing silos, creating that connective tissue in order to be successful for our students, much like we did during the pandemic. The districts that did it well, the states that did it well, worked well together. I think we have an opportunity now. As a matter of fact, I think we're going to have egg on our face if we don't take this more seriously than we are, given the investments that President Biden and Vice President Harris have ushered through in the first 3 years. There is an opportunity here that we cannot miss in this country.
We were, not to disclose too much, but we were talking about arguments that are based on a moral imperative.
Right,
But, you were talking about the economic imperative.
Of course. Look, if we rely on a moral imperative to get this right, we're going to be holding our breath for a long time. If we believe that moral imperative is enough to move things in education, we wouldn't have an achievement gap. There's an economic imperative, and I see that when I travel the country. I was in Ohio, and I was talking to the vice president of Intel, who set up shop in Columbus, Ohio, because they had a K-12 and a higher ed system and partners in the community that were embracing workforce development and pathways. And they brought $2 billion to the local economy. I was in Idaho speaking to Micron executives. $15 billion to that economy. So my message is to the governors and to the legislative leaders is, look, don't be left out. This is why at the Department of Education under Amy Lloyd's leadership and Luke Ryan and the team here, we're creating toolkits, playbooks. Like nobody needs from DC a shiny paper that says this is the theory behind it. We need practical tools. How do we get this done? We have a playbook for governors. We have a playbook for mayors. We have a playbook for industry partners. This is economic stability. This is economic development. This is community development. The only challenge, in my opinion, that we have to think about, too, is, I come from Connecticut, right? And Connecticut in the house? Anybody from Connecticut? All right, shout out to all 3 Connecticut folks here. Thank you for coming. Now, look, Groton Submarine Base, thousands of jobs, high-skill, high-paying careers. I visited a school close by. Every student that was going to class for welding has a job. They're going to be making $70,000, $80,000 a year, which is mid-career teacher pay. We're going to have some issues if we don't get this right. But now you go to, you become a welder, you're making $70,000 to $80,000 a year, you continue and get skills in coding, and now you're handling the mechatronics machine, and you're not doing the welding, the machine is, you're well over $100,000. folks, if we're serious about fixing the broken higher education system and loan system, we have to provide alternatives that are meaningful, that are within reach to our students. And it requires that we come together to do that.
Well, let's wonder if we could explore that a little bit more. You know, I think the data are pretty clear that a four-year degree is still, you know, a good tool for economic mobility. But at the same time, there are a lot of data that show, you know, it cannot be the only path, right? And should not be the only path that we provide to good careers. So wanted to hear a little bit of your thinking about how do we expand the array of post-secondary pathways, so including those that include workforce credentials. The reason I'm going down this road is the example you brought up, and yet leave doors open to further education and training.
These systems should be talking to each other. I often say that real education evolution and growth happens in between the meetings. Just yesterday, I had a meeting with intergovernmental affairs folks from across the country. I had representatives from the National Council of State Legislators. I had National Governors Association in the room. Governor Polis was sharing his plan, his vision as chair of the NGA. We had state boards of education representatives there. And we were talking about how we can come together to provide pathways. We were talking about how state boards of education must have a policy on this. Local boards of education must have policies on this. And then at the department, our job is to lift up bright spots, share examples, but also not be fooled by thinking that we're going to do a one-size-fits-all and it's going to work across the country. So, you know, for us, our approach is really to meet folks where they are and give them a continuum of growth, point them to examples where it works, you know, and this is, I know you know this, but this is the most purple issue we have. This is about our country reaching its potential and our students reaching their potential. Unfortunately, we've done this four-year college or bust mentality, and that's hurt our students and hurt our systems. And I would argue that good pathway programs, good CTE learning, is better instruction, better learning, period. It's problem-based learning, it's experiential learning. So it's just better pedagogy. It provides more opportunities for students. But if we think that we're going to rely on the same system, the one that has, in some places, over 1,000 students for every school counselor, if we think that system is going to be what's going to bring us the change, we're being foolish. So we have to be innovative, and we have to collaborate not only within the schoolhouse, but outside of the schoolhouse.
Appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit more about collaboration, because I know through Unlocking Career Success and other efforts, you've really put an emphasis on interagency collaboration. It's going to take, you know, commerce, it's labor, energy, et cetera. So wanted to see if you could share some lessons for other folks out in the audience who are leading cross-sector efforts at the state and local levels. What have you learned and what advice do you have?
Sure, you know, and that's really important. I was talking to you before. There's no magic strategy. And there's no strategy that's going to work in every state. I think the leadership the important work of leadership now lies in the intentional collaboration. I always make it analogous to reopening schools. When you reopen schools, you had to work with the health department differently, the governor's office differently, employers differently. That's where we are right now. So I can't expect from the states something that I'm not willing to model. So Jennifer Granholm and I, you know, when we were talking about the energy climate provisions under the Inflation Reduction Act, you know, the battery plants showing up in different places and the need for that, we were getting giddy about, okay, how are our teams going to work together? Gina Raimondo in Commerce, how are those workforce dollars supporting pipeline programs in our schools, in our two-year schools, in our community-based organizations? How are we creating that infrastructure that's needed, that human infrastructure, to make sure that the planning is cohesive? Because in this country, we have a lot of random acts of pathways, you know? But we do, and some of them are really good, but my mentality is, how do we systematize this with the leaders as opposed to tell them how to do it, and then when you leave, your plan leaves with you, which is how federal education policy has happened historically. We need to make sure that there's a shared ownership of it, that there's a connective tissue. You know, so in Connecticut, we had a workforce development team with industry partners, K-12, higher ed, and community leaders. every state has a little bit different approach to it, and I think context does matter. Demographics different, the industry needs are different, the arrangements with higher education and K-12 are different. So our approach has been to roll up our sleeves. I've been to 48 states. I've traveled with the First Lady about 12 times on this topic. We put dollars there. We have experts. We count on leaders like yourselves and you to say, what is the best approach? And then we have great leaders in our communities, like I know Superintendent from Indiana is here, Superintendent Jenner, who really, they take this on. They recognize how important it is. So for me, it's really creating that connective tissue. And one size does not fit all. But if you're not prioritizing in your governor's proposal, if this is not something that the chief of education is not prioritizing in their state, then there's very little chance that it's going to take root, at the school level. But we cannot expect different results if we don't disrupt the current structure of our schools and our school policy.
Thanks for that. And I can't believe how quickly the time is passing, but I'm going to ask you a pretty deep question here in our final couple of minutes here. But, we have a North Star goal at JFF of by 2033, 75 million people who face systemic barriers are working in good, high-quality jobs. And I wanted to ask you, what are you seeing as the big barriers to equity in achieving that? And what advice would you have for folks in the room for how we can break through these barriers together?
Yeah, access and affordability, we need a change in mindset. High quality CTE instruction is good pedagogy. It gets students engaging with one another and having them experience those skills that employers are looking for. So instead of looking at CTE as a category over here, that has to be infused into the DNA of our K-12 systems and our higher ed systems. It's not an over there thing. Equity for the last 20, 30 years has been, we have somebody that focuses on equity. We're never going to get to where we need to get to if it's somebody's job to focus on equity. It should be the lens through which we see education. I feel the same way about this. Our job is to help students have options. When I went to high school, I studied automotive technology for 4 years. I worked on fixing cars. I ended up going to college to become a teacher. But it was those 4 years, that experience of good pedagogy, engaging with colleagues, problem solving, experiential learning, that prepared me for the work that I do today. So my mentality is, let's be clear about this vision of equity and access. CTE shouldn't be looked at as a side thing. This should be part of the DNA of all of our school programming, which means that we have to really revisit how we staff our schools. If we don't have career counselors that understand the industry needs in our communities, then we're failing our kids. If we expect our school counselors who have so much on their plate with the youth mental health crisis, academic advising, if we think that they're going to become the experts now, we're fooling ourselves. So how are we moving state boards of education, local boards of education, governors and GEPAs, which we've met with, to say, what is your vision for your state? How can we support that? That's the true work here. And let me tell you, because of President Biden, Vice President Harris, there's more dollars available to create these pipeline programs. But we need all of you to help us in the school system create that vision, create that connective tissue that I know is going to lead our country and our students to success.